Hello, welcome everyone to Shofar Durbanville. It's nice to see everyone tonight. So tonight we're just going to start with quick two announcements before we go over to Storytellers. So we have two exciting announcements. So firstly, we are planning a young adults camp on the 16th to the 18th of April. So you can write down that date if you are keen and if you feel like a young adult. So it will just be a great time for getting to know one another, having some fellowship, and really just spending time with the Lord. We really have a great expectation for that. So if you're keen, if you have any questions, you can speak to me, you can speak to Theo or to Susan. And I'm going to give over to Christian for the other announcement.
Okay, so tomorrow evening we have a young adult worship evening, but it's for young adults and students and everyone who feels young at heart. So it's just called the Young Adults Worship Evening, but everyone is welcome. So we're just going to get together and worship together. It's just going to be it's going to be an amazing time, and there will be some snacks. So if you just want to come for the snacks and stay for the worship, we will love that as well, as long as you're there. So yes, and it will be here at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. We'd love to see all of you there. Cool, thank you.
Good evening. Hope you can hear me. Welcome to Storytelling with not Theo. Theo is he's studying. He's starting his master's yesterday they started. So if you've parked a car here, Leon has maybe asked you if he can wash your car. He feels like one of our colleagues. He feels like the security down at the bottom there. And since last time I helped Theo with the interview, Leon now calls me Oprah. So when I got another opportunity, I thought, let's take the chance to have my second opportunity to be called Oprah. So another reason I said yes to this evening is because of the two people sitting here next to me, Estelle and Helmuth have been, I learned now, I thought they've just been elders at Tygerberg and Durbanville, and I just learned that they were actually my elders when we were students at Stellenbosch. So they have been elders in our community for many years and incredibly faithful. And so we've actually been in church for many years, but it was only 2 years ago that I had the immense privilege of going on a camp with Estelle and discovering that she has the most amazing servant heart, that she is the most delightful. The one night I was finishing up somewhere and I come in and all the women are rolling, like literally holding their tummies, shaking. They're laughing so much because Estelle was telling a story. And I was like, I'm going to spend more time with Estelle. And then Helmut has always just been this absolute pillar in our community. So thank you for sharing your evening with us. And more than that, thank you for the honor of listening to your story this evening. Helmut, we're going to start with you.
Yes. What do you want me to say?
I would love you. You mustn't let my Oprah reputation go down the drain now. I would love you to just tell us about yourself, what you're doing, your family, where you live.
So we live in Belleville. We've been living here for many years, 20 years now. Before that, 10 years in Stellenbosch. what I do, I work for a big auditing firm, and I do something we call risk assurance, which we're not going to get into tonight. And yeah, we've got 3 kids. We married almost 23 years, yeah, and we've been in church a little longer than that together. So.
Great. Estelle, and we obviously know you're married to Helmuth and you've got 3 kids,
Yes.
but what do you do?
You forgot to mention he's married to a wonderful woman. But anyway,
Excuse me.
I-
Sorry.
Yeah, so we live here in Bellville. We've got 3 kids. I work at Parliament, not at Parliament anymore, for Parliament, from home for a year now. Everything's virtual, but I've been there quite a number of years. Post 94, and then I was at home for a few years, and now I'm back there.
Okay, and just quickly, your son and then twins, is that hectic, having twins? And now that they're older, is it wonderful? Or
It was such a blessing. We always say we went underground for about 18 months because we had the 3 kids in under 2
Yes, I
years. Maybe
remember.
we'll talk about that later a bit. But we were a bit overwhelmed. But I mean, obviously it's a tremendous blessing.
Yes,
Yeah.
oh, beautiful. Helmut, tell us a little bit, what was your home like growing up? Where do you come from? And what was the spiritual climate in your home growing up?
So I was born in Mthatha. My dad worked at a missionary station called Kanzebe, and him and my mother met each other there. And I've got 2 brothers. We were all born in Mthatha, and then from there we moved and briefly lived in East London, and then we went and settled in Knysna in the Garden Route. And my dad started working for the Department of Forestry in those days, and we lived on a forestry station. I had a great childhood growing up, playing literally in the indigenous forests and the pine plantations. Went fishing, like the thing said there. I love the outdoors and those sort of things. So, and then in terms of a home, my parents were always very faithful in taking us to church. For a long time, when we moved to Knysna, we served in a small community outside of town, and my dad and my mother was running the children's church ministry. So they've always been very involved in church. Like, I didn't grow up with a choice of going to church or not. It was like, get up and go. That was what we did. From a environment, I had a lot of exposure to church, a lot of exposure to God, the Word. I knew the Word very well as a small child. I think I knew it better than most adults knew the Word. I really memorized quite a bit portion of it. So I was really into the Word. My parents were actually had relations with God, and they were serving Him faithfully. So.
What a privilege to grow up in a home where your parents have relationship with God, and where, if I hear you share now what your joy is in our church community, it's still the Word of God and teaching it and empowering people through it. Estelle, your home growing up, where did you grow up? What was the spiritual climate?
I was actually born in East London. The first 10 years of my life was spent in the Eastern Cape, in East London and Gqeberha. And then from there, 10 years in Gauteng, Centurion, and also studying at Tuks, 10 years in Stellenbosch. Okay, now I've left my childhood behind now. So growing up, my father worked for the Department of Justice his whole life. He was an advocate for the state. My mother was an Afrikaans teacher. I had have one sister still. We're quite close. She's just 15 months older than me. And we also grew up, I suppose, in the traditional, for the 70s and 80s, Afrikaans household. We went to the traditional Dutch Reformed Church. We always went. So I went to Sunday school. I never doubted, at least while I was at school, that God existed. Although I didn't have a relationship with Him. I was, I suppose, religious in a sense, up to a point. The home environment was challenging in the sense that I would say I didn't grow up feeling unconditionally loved and accepted. Because of, wounding that took place in generations. So people are wounded, have hurts, and there's some anger and issues that on top of that. So I suppose the verbal culture, if I can call it that, wasn't one of affirming unconditionally, you are okay, type of thing. So that was, well, if you achieved, you were celebrated. The achievements were celebrated. But it's just like verbally. But like I said, my father, I mentioned earlier, he's the most generous person that you can think. I only in later years realized that was his way of showing that he loved us. He's really providing what we need. And even up until now, that is how he basically communicates. He puts away every month, even now he's been a pensioner for a number of years, he puts away every month for each of our 3 kids for studies, for instance. So that is how, and he even gives them pocket money. So apart, separate from us. So that is his, but obviously growing up, being a child, I didn't have the wherewithal to realize that he does love me, and that is the only way he knows to show it. So,
Yes. When my husband did the World Needs a Father course last year, he said one of the questions they ask is, what is the primary role of a father? And I think in your father's generation, the answer would have been provision. That's what I do. And how by God's grace over the years, many of our men in our church realize identity, affirmation, a place of safety. So yeah, it's a strong generational thing that we trust God will do. Helmut, you shared now about your growing up. You had you knew of God. You went to Sunday school. Your parents had a living relationship with God. And just now you shared a beautiful story as well of moments that you really encountered a living God. Quickly tell that story for us, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so growing up, I knew God existed. There was never in my mind a doubt whether God existed or not. And I remember when I was in grade 3, there was a colouring in competition. And in grade 3, that's really important in your life, colouring in competitions. And for one other reason, I needed a white pencil. There was something on this drawing that I wanted to colour in white, and for the contrast, and we didn't have a white pencil at home. So I asked my mother for a white pencil, and she said, well, it's great that I wanted one. She's sure I can find us another solution for this, because she's not going to go and buy a set of 24 pencils just for the white pencil, because in those days, I don't know nowadays, but the normal 12 sets doesn't have, so you have to buy the 24 sets. And I went to my room at some stage. I can't remember whether it was at that time or later, but I prayed and I said, God, I want a white pencil, and I really want, I know I may not win this competition, but I really want to color that bit in white. And the next day at pause or break, I walked past the bin on the corner, and on the floor next to the bin laid half a white pencil. So I was amazed that happened, and I went home, did my drawing. My mother obviously thought I stole it. So it took a bit of convincing to tell her no, but I actually prayed, and this is something God gave me. So I knew about God. There was a few moments at camps where there was an altar call where I really felt God's tugging, but everybody else was fine. And I looked around at everybody else, and they were always fine. And then I thought, well, if everybody else is fine, then surely I'm fine too. And then later in grade 8, so old standard 6, my father got dreams. God spoke to him through dreams. And during that time, that was 1986, so it's a long, long time ago. And some of you in the audience may not have been born then already. But in 1986, he had a dream in March, when God specifically says to him that leave the church you are in and go to this other specific church. And it was hard in those days. People were not so enlightened as they are today. Small community, very, your church is where you live. It is your community. So it took my dad a few weeks to work through that one, but eventually in April we went. The first service was a huge culture shock for me, for the whole family. It was quite different to what we used to. But the strange thing is we felt at home. It was not like when my parents asked us afterwards, would you be willing to go again? And we're 3 boys, 3 brothers. We all said, yes, we'll go again. And the week thereafter, we went again the evening, because in the mornings we still went to the other church. And I was standing and there was an altar call. I remember I was standing, we're not sitting, and the altar call went out, and I thought to myself, you know what, I'm okay, because I don't, and all those things that, good people do. I didn't steal the white pencil. I don't swear, I don't fight. I'm a good person. I'm really good. I'm not even trying that hard. I'm just by nature, that is, unfortunately, by nature I was very good. It was God, not me. But in any case, so I stood there and I remember clearly thinking, this is not for me. I'm okay with God. And I heard almost audibly God saying, but you've never surrendered your life to me. And that was, sorry, it was really a moment of my life where it was so precious. And I went forward and gave my life to God. And, my life completely changed around. Like I said, I really knew the Bible, but my appetite for the Bible was insatiable. After that, I remember at least on 2 occasions, but I read through the Bible in 3 days, from Genesis to Revelations. And it just, it really changed my life. I thought I was okay in doing things, but then I realized, even before meeting Christ, it's like you do all these things because you want to be good in all those things. But when you meet Christ, you realize you're not doing it for anybody else, but for Him, and to serve Him, and to glorify Him, and to have a relationship with Him, and not mess up that relationship with Him. So, yeah, it was a huge thing in my life.
Helmut, you said, how old were you when you gave your life to the Lord? You surrendered?
13.
13. To still feel so emotional and understand how precious that moment is. Yeah, that's amazing. Estelle, you went on a journey.
Yes, I
tell us
always
about it.
joke. I always say, I know nobody's born saved. Everybody's born in sin. But my husband was as close as you can possibly come to being born saved. He was always good. And God knew He had to save him for me, because I messed up enough for both of us. Last time I was at the home circumstances. So, round about when I was about 13, because I was then in grade 9, which is standard 7, I was always a year younger than the rest. So I went to the youth at church, the KJA, Church Youth Association, and this one Friday evening, they showed us this movie about hell. And it was so scary. I remember the flames and the worms, and my 2 friends and I just said, no,
The worms are just too hectic.
we're not going there, as we were really scared straight. So the next day, we got on our bicycles and we cycled to the dominee's house, the preacher's house, and we knocked on the door, said we want to see the dominee. And he let us there into his study, and we said to him, listen, we were really scared of that movie. Please tell us what we must do. We don't want to go there. And he set our minds at ease. He basically told us, you're okay, you've been baptized or sprinkled because you've been dedicated into, God's covenant. What we do, there was no mention of repentance or personal relationship with God, but he basically told us we don't have to worry. We are good.
And you felt fine after that.
So then we were off again. And funny enough, later in that same year, I started, because I was always a good girl, I suppose, not as good as Helmuth, but I wasn't really, I tried to be good. But then I started rebelling because of, not having, I suppose, being affirmed at home. I started really living a very rebellious life, and sneaking out at all hours, smoking, drinking, you name it. And obviously, my mother must receive a big crown one day in heaven, everything she put up with. But I realize now that God really, in those times, really had His hand of protection on me supernaturally for, things that could have happened to me, for all the nonsense and places we weren't supposed to. So I carried on like that, and obviously then everything tanked. Grades, I didn't want to do athletics anymore. There was no achievement. There was just...
And that's what your house affirmed.
Yeah. So there was quite a lot of conflict obviously at that time, at one stage, I was even shipped off to a hostel in Pretoria office because of, and I wanted to go. I was, because I'd read these books, I mean, only really older people recall these Afrikaans books about Maasdorp, hostel stories, and it was very romanticized, and I thought it's going to be like that, but it was nothing like that. So, looking back now, I realized I was quite depressed at that stage, but luckily by the end of that year, I begged and I was sent back to my old school, so I was back at home. When I got to university, because I was the first time that I met people there who didn't believe in God, or who thought differently than I did, which was quite a shock, because even, my partying days, we all still went to church, we're religious. So, and I also met people there at varsity with this students' society I joined for a democratic society, that people that didn't look like me or grew up where I did. And then for the first time, I was confronted with a lot of things that I believed growing up wasn't necessarily so. And hearing the story from the other side and realizing, and then I thought, well, if all of these other things, wat is die swart gevaar en die rooi gevaar and all these other things, and things that were happening that we didn't know of, then I thought, but then is God even real? Because the church and the state was very closely, and that was the first time I thought, because I'd never met him, I'd only heard about him. So then I actually for a while doubted if God even existed. And I remember having talks with my mother, and she must have been horrified. But anyway, eventually I came out with the belief that, okay, God does exist, but I'm just going to enjoy my life and have as good a time as I can, do whatever I want, and then right at the end, on my deathbed, I'm going to give my life to the Lord. But I'm not going to that place with the worms and the flames. So that was the plan when I was a student.
Sure. And then I know a life of sacrifice and a life that's come since. What happened that made that all possible? What changed in your life there at varsity?
Okay, so I finished up at Pretoria, and then I came down to Stellenbosch we were 3 friends from high school. The one was at Marty's originally, and 2 of us came down because we just wanted 1 year together in Stellenbosch. So we came to do a postgrad 1-year course, and when I got to Stellenbosch, it was like the whole new world opened. It was party, party, party. It was just one big, and there was a lot of drinking. I couldn't believe, it was like, wow, it was just one big party, and I was enjoying myself. And there was a lot of drinking, and I must say every few weeks, maybe every month or 2, I'd sort of feel a bit guilty, and then I would sort of sneak into it was still the Stellenbosch West Dutch Reformed Church, and sit at the back there on a Sunday evening, and then I would walk out and I feel, okay, I'm good to go now again. I can drink for a month or 2 again and just party up, because now I feel okay again. So thinking I was living my best life, but actually, So I always waitressed from very young. I've always worked in restaurants. So in this one, I worked in Stellenbosch in a restaurant, and I met this girl, same age as me, and she partied hard, and she wasn't religious at all. So I was still religious in my sense, but she didn't believe. There was this guy who was in Shofar working there, and when he came, tried to say, she was like, F off with that crap, she didn't want to know. And I was still, chatting with him, and like, let's pray over our staff meals and what, I was still sort of, even though, So I went home up to Gauteng for one holiday, and when I came back, this girl had gotten radically saved. It's like, what happened? She just totally, she looked different, she acted different. It was like she really was a new creation. So initially I was shocked, because, I didn't understand. Because, I was the good one between the 2 of us. But she really, she just, obviously her life changed. But what drew me in there was the way this is not the first time that I came into contact with somebody who actually had a relationship that I could see there's real in her life. There's a God, and he's talking to her, and she's talking to him. It's not just, him sitting up there with a stick. So I really wanted that. And, but also, I still wanted to enjoy my life, you see. So I was now thinking, okay, if I have to, I can't go to the pubs anymore. I can't drink anymore. I must probably stop smoking if So I was sort of, but the one night, after the restaurant closed, we were cycling down to that robot on the Strand Road. She was going to go to the Boert, and I was going to go to my student house where I was staying. And I remember just saying to her, I also want to have that, what I want, what you have. Because really, I realized it's the goodness of God that led me to repentance, not the hellfire and brimstone. So she said to me, just talk, because I'd never at that stage, I had a Bible, and in exam times, I would definitely read a verse or two. And
we're all guilty of that.
Yeah, something very uplifting, and then I would just lie in bed and pray, but in my mind, really just reciting a rhyme. That was because I didn't really think that, it's going above the roof. So she said to me, just talk, out loud, as if he's sitting there with you, because he is. So I went to my room that night, and I sat on my bed, and I just said, hi, hello, it's me. And I just, and I experienced that night God's presence for the first time in my life. And yes, just that he was real, and the peace. And I must say, for all the cost that I was counting ahead of time, I had the desire to do other things. Even to smoke was God instantly, it was gone. It was like there was a big hole, and I was filling it with all these things. And now the hole was filled. So honestly, it wasn't a sacrifice not to do, and I didn't have a desire for any of those things. And then the next day, she still said, okay, she's just going to make an appointment for me with Pastor Fred, just to make sure. Because I told her, hey, I've got it, I'm saved. So I went to see him, and he prayed the sinner's prayer with me. But before that, he talked about the prodigal son and the love of the Father. And that was like, just and thinking about it now for tonight, I realized that my walk with God hasn't been just, one way up like I thought it would be at the beginning. It really was been like this. But after every valley or crisis, it's always come down to that. With the Father coming, standing with his arms open, and me coming from the pigs, whether it's depression or being angry with him or disappointed. It's just he's always been there with his arms open wide and loving on me and giving me all the things that I don't deserve or could never earn.
That's so powerful. I was thinking a lot about that, that story of the prodigal son, and more and more I'd say, Lord, I'd rather be the one coming from the pigs than the one in your house and not knowing your heart. Thank you for sharing. Helmuth, you, as a 13-year-old, gave your life, you surrendered your life to God, and then you also went on a journey. What was that journey?
So, I think the first thing is just there's a few things happened. There was, in that first year, shortly after I gave my life to God, my parents took us to a tent ministry in the sticks. It was literally in the sticks. A tent, I don't know how they got the tent there. There wasn't really proper roads there. We got there, and on the second night, they made an invitation for, if anybody was sick. And on that stage, I was wearing glasses, and I couldn't really see much without those. I needed those. And I went forward, and they prayed for me, and God healed me. And only recently now, eating in the middle of 40s, that I had to start wearing glasses again. So that was amazing to me as a child. And then we were in a very tight-knit community. About a year after we joined that church, my dad had another dream, and we moved to another church. We pretty much, the rest of my school years, spent the time there. And God was so faithful. There was such community, but not just community and Holy Spirit. I saw other miracles and things happening, and I was exposed to those things that many other people, even today, haven't been exposed to. So it's really a privilege growing up in that community. And but towards the end of my school years, around I would say even stand middle of high school, I started getting slight headaches, and towards my end of school, it started getting worse. And then when I got to varsity at some stage, it really started getting, and it was debilitating. Probably could say it's migraines. I'm not sure. It's so long ago now. And it came, and I couldn't do anything when it struck me. And I was fighting with God about that at the time. And during my second year, so maybe, I must say that, yeah. So during my second year of varsity, in the middle of, towards the end of the first half of the year, I got a little bit rebellious, because I was trusting God for, to heal me from these headaches, and just nothing happened. And I went on a little bit of a detour, and I just spent a lot of time with my friends, that holiday, July holiday. And I know at some stage, my mother phoned us. I was literally living at some other kid's house, one of my friend's house. They didn't see me at all. And she'd come home, we miss you. And I said, yeah, no, we'll come after this cricket, whatever. I don't know, we were watching some sports at the time. And then the one evening, it was a Saturday evening, I can't remember exactly, it's the 4th of July, in 1992, it's a long time ago. I was driving my friends, we had an all green Volkswagen Beetle, and I was driving the Beetle at like at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, taking friends home. And on the way back, I misjudged the road. I didn't realize, I forgot that they resurfaced the road. There was a lot of little loose stones on the road, and I was going too fast, and I hit the lamppost. But that wasn't the big thing. The thing that changed my life, as I phoned my dad at 3 o'clock in the morning to tell him I really damaged the car. And the beautiful thing was, he didn't ask, he wasn't angry at me, he didn't condemn me. He just said, are you okay? Are your friends okay? The guy in the car with me was Jan. He says, Jan okay? He said, yeah, Jan hit the front of the windscreen. There's a little bit of a crack, but Jan is okay. And I said, but the car's really damaged. He said, don't worry about the car, it's fine. We'll sort it out tomorrow, don't worry. And, he never blamed me, he didn't judge me, and I felt really stupid about it, and really felt guilty, and thought, oh, this is not the worst. Now, I'm the good guy, so now the good guy really stuffed up here. And I went home after that, and my dad never spoke again. We fixed the car, I helped him fix the car. He was just so kind, it was like nothing really happened. But I didn't do anything bad. And then the next it was close, so the next weekend I went back to Stellenbosch University, and one of my friends that studied with me, Nikki Sedane, is a farmer now, he invited me to church. And if my dad did not treat me the way that he did, I would have said no. But because of the way he treated me, I said yes. And when I walked in there that Sunday evening, I still remember it. As I said, God's presence was there. It was so beautiful. And really and I've never looked back from that moment.
Wow, both of your stories tell of God's goodness, drawing us to repentance and having that tangible earthly experience of that kindness when one could have said you deserved a good scolding is so powerful. Estelle, going forward, you had that wonderful moment chatting to Pastor Fred. What did you do going forward from there? How did you grow in God? How did you do life? How did your life change after that moment?
Well, it was like, I don't know, being underwater and coming up into the air, or from darkness to light, literally. Like I said, I thought I was living my best life, enjoying myself, but the moment I said yes to God, looking back, I thought, how did I ever live like that? It just felt so empty, and it was like God just came and He filled this hole up, and I was just full of and then I must say, okay, it was a different, Karine spoke a bit about it when they were up here. We were all young. Our shofar was quite small. It was just the one in Stellenbosch, and we were all basically young students or young working, and so we had nothing but time on our hands. We didn't have families and husbands and kids, so we literally lived the church. Every night it was church. And like, before there was like formal Bible school, that came later in the 90s. There used to be like on a Wednesday night in the Wilcox building, School of the Word, and everybody was there. And I always, I have to honor Pastors Fred and Lucille. Whatever happened to them afterwards, they poured themselves out in that time. They really built into us. So much of later now that I still can recite of the word comes from that first. When I got saved, it's like I read my Bible. It was like I've never read it before in my life. It was like everything was new. It was like real for the first time, and all the teaching and all, like, we were so committed. It was a little bit, I suppose, like in Acts, because there was nothing else. Like Friday nights, we would have like a prayer intercession. The whole church would be there at the Hofmeyer Hall there in Church Street. Everybody would stand at big, and we would just pray through the night. It was just a wonderful time of, a lot of teaching being imparted and really living a church community. It was actually, I look back at that fondly. I have to say, talk about false advertising, my poor sister, she was up in Pretoria, having a little bit of, being in between, not being sure, and I told her just before that all day, listen, come to Stellenbosch. It is just a party. You will see. It is just great. You'd go, it's like the akker, and it's there, and it's wine tasting, and by the time she made it down there, I'd gotten saved. So there was no drinking, no partying, no nothing. It was just church every night. It was just church. Obviously, she was not very impressed, but she obviously also serves the Lord today. She didn't take long to get saved in that environment.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I got to know her in the church office when she worked there for many years.
Yeah. So there was something I wanted to say, now I've forgotten.
I can't even on that.
Okay. Yeah, so that was the church life that we had. It was just, often I think back and I realize it's really that part in the Bible. It says, if you don't become like little children, you won't enter the kingdom. Because even then, I remember we were like, if somebody did something and offended you, you just couldn't forgive quick enough. You just wanted, heart to be clean. Our hearts were tender, and we really, so those are really precious times. And obviously I met Helmuth there, although initially, because I'm 1 year older than him, but because I'm 2 years ahead in terms of matric, so I matriculated 88 and he did in 90. So when I got to shofar, he was still a student, and then I'd started working. So I knew of him, but he was like he had this long shaggy hair, and he was like one of the young guys, the students, and we were like, I was a bit older.
Mature.
Yes. All of 22 years. But anyway, but one day I was working in town and I walked through the Golden Acre still in my lunchtime, and here this handsome guy comes walking up, and the hair is cut neatly, and he's got a tie and a blazer and a little aktetassie? Briefcase. It's like, what? That's Helmuth. I still thought to myself, he's grown up quite nicely. It's like, So I then for the first time looked at him in a different light. But it was quite a few years still that we were just friends. He was my cell leader, obviously, at one stage, so that nothing untoward happened
And so
at that time.
I kept the boundaries there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's wonderful. Helmuth, what stands out in that time for you? What were the things that built your faith, that built into you, that you saw in other people, that encouraged you?
Sure. There was so much. I think what Estelle said and what Karine also said, like we were really immersed in church. There was really only student life or work and church. There wasn't really anything else. We literally had something on every day of the week, every night of the week, and then sometimes multiple times of prayer during the week. Then Saturdays would go, even Friday evenings for intercession, go and pray at Paul or wherever. I don't even know how we got there, but I remember going to Paul specifically a lot of time to pray there at different places. So we were very active, and obviously there was lots of missions happening. And then for me, I think one of the things in that time, I mentioned the headache. So the headache was a big part for me, and when I sort of joined Shofar at the time, it's something that I grew almost like I made peace with it. That okay, this is my life. It took me quite a few months, maybe even a year, when I really started saying, God, but is it going to be like this forever? I just want to say, at the end of my first year, it got so bad in the middle of the exam. I went to see a doctor and said I got a headache, and I don't know what he saw, but in case they thought I had an aneurysm waiting to pop. So in the middle of my exam, I had to go and for MRIs and lumbar punches and all those nice little things, and then to go and write my major the next morning. So that's sort of the life. So it wasn't really nice. And then, but I sort of became used to that, and then not used to the fact, but I was like quietly trusting God, And then at the end of my third year, an evangelist called Elizabeth Austin came and visited us, the church. And so at some point in time, I can't remember, during the service, she made an altar call for people with headaches. And then she prayed for me. And then God healed me instantaneously in that spot, at the time. And I remember walking away. I never had headaches again, ever since. So that was, again, and like I said, in my high school years as well, we saw people getting healed. We saw people being filled. We saw, deliverance. We really saw those things happening in front of our eyes. Some of them were a little bit stupid and didn't have really lots of knowledge around. We do it slightly differently now, but it was really amazing because we experienced God. We experienced God as being real, and we having real authority. Not just superfluous. And when we prayed, things happened. There were so many times. There was this time in Stellenbosch in those early days where the Satanists literally was holding seances in the middle of the street. It was pervasive. And then because of, not necessarily just us, but we prayed against that and walked the town physically on foot, prayed and prayed and prayed. And that completely changed the atmosphere of the town. So there was a lot of things that we were privileged to be a part of. It was a real privilege to be part of that whole setting and experiencing God in that way. And seeing people coming to salvation on a daily basis, almost, people from all walks of life. Druggies, we had a couple of druggies, crazy guys. They, the one guy baptized the other, or they were talking about anointing oil, and he just took a 5-liter can of oil and used motor oil. Because he just heard that you need to use oil. So that was the oil. But he just poured out this motor oil over this guy. He was really anointed after that. So it's like real sincere searching for God in that time.
Yeah, it was really an amazing sense of, you mentioned at Acts Church, there was this on fire group, and what strikes me always is if I think of you guys and Dal and Karin, I always have a little holy jealousy, which is most probably not good, but I was sort of the next generation, so I might have just seen them leave. But if I look how the church was thriving and my personal experience and the same amazing thankfulness I have towards Fred and Lucille for having been so faithful, but to have seen that growth from just one generation or one era of students to the next, there was something really powerful that happened there and that you had the privilege of being part of. But it was a wholehearted throwing yourself in, sort of going, I'm not despising my youth. That's wonderful. So a wonderful time at varsity growth. You guys meet each other. But so we know, when you give your life to the Lord and you're semi-perfect from birth, life isn't just perfect. And we all have trials, and they're places where God forms our character. Helmut, do you maybe want to start? What are some of those events in your life that that formed you? Or yeah, you're welcome.
So there were many events. My wife will cover the one now. I think,
Just to make sure his facts are straight.
yeah, I don't remember as well, as detailed always. So yes, after we got married, I think, yeah, she'll cover those areas. When we, I think for me, the first time when we were married, the kids were all born, we just wanted to move house to a bigger house. We were living in a fairly small townhouse, and the problem was not the size of the house, the problem was the size of the yard, which is probably about literally 10 square meters. It was almost nothing. And we wanted to move to a bigger house. And so we bought a plot of land, we started building, and things went horribly wrong. And at some point in time, more than once actually, quite a few times, we almost lost the whole house and all our money. God was gracious, and but there was times there, I think where we like literally the only thing we had was anything that worked was our credit cards. I don't know, the petrol card actually. The credit cards didn't work, but the banks hadn't figured out that you can still use the petrol card. Somehow we used the petrol card to buy stuff. I don't know.
We ate from Woolies because I could get food on credit there.
So it was really tough times, and but there were so times when the thing that I say is in that time when it was so tough, God gave me a scripture and said, "You will not be ashamed." One of Isaiah, I can't remember, somewhere in Isaiah, and you know we were never ashamed. Like the one day the sheriff pitched at our house, I wasn't even there. My parents were visiting us, and he said, "Listen, there's a few things he wants to, take away and sell, whatever."
Let's write it up now.
Yeah, so we wanted to write it up, and then we said, "Okay, well, she said to him, but okay, my in-laws are here. Can you come back on Monday?" and he did. And then by the Monday, we had sorted out, I don't know where, we got some money and we could pay that specific creditor. So it was financially very difficult. There was another time that we'd sort of paid off the more urgent debt. So we were only owing the banks essentially at that stage. All the other people that we owed money, we'd paid off. And I said to God, you know what, I really want to take away for I think it was our anniversary, if I remember correctly. But like I had no money, like nothing. And then somebody that, owed me money from years before, and I've written it off, like forgotten about it. It really was not, I was not expecting that money to come back ever. And then he just paid us back that money. So, and that was like a direct answer to prayer right there, and I could take her away, and we had a beautiful time away. Can you remember that?
I was very worried about, that was about a week or two after the sheriff came to write up what he wants to
And
take
you're off
away.
the weekend.
I was like, really? And it was a nice place in Franschhoek. I was like, wow. I stopped being worried. He said, no, we're okay. And we had, it was lovely.
She thought I sold a kidney or something at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so through that time, that was hard. It wasn't a quick solution. That was years after that to build up from there, and we lost a huge amount of money. But obviously, money isn't everything in life. So, yeah, God protected us through all of that. Protected the kids. It was God was faithful every time. Like the one time I remember our bank, so we're no longer banking with them. They just decided to revoke my overdraft. So my salary went in, but it just disappeared. And then you had to, and God was even faithful in those days, every time that there was something that came that was really, you look at the natural and say, okay, I'm not going to get out of this. My salary just disappeared, all my debit orders are going to go off. They just revoked the overdraft without informing us. Those sort of things, and then God still comes through, and, I can't even remember what happened there. Can you? I can't remember even, but I know God came through, we were fine. I don't know it's too long.
And in that time, I remember hearing about a house, and if I think back now, I think that's most probably the time you were doing the kiddies ministry, and I mean, you were ever present at church, and you didn't withdraw from your community to survive. You carried on serving and giving of yourself. So, wow, I really want to honor you for that. Estelle, you have a story that Helmut mentioned.
Yeah, it's just, I think I have shared actually this before on the stage on a Sunday morning, but when we decided it's time to start a family, obviously the first month you think, oh, I might be pregnant, and then nothing, in the second month nothing, and every month you're so excited, and then quite a bit of time goes by, and nothing's happening. And then, meanwhile, your friends are getting pregnant one by one, and so we eventually went and tested. I had, everything we checked out, him and me, and all the, only to be told, you guys have less than 1% chance of actually conceiving naturally. So, in fact, the guy said, as far as he's concerned, there's no chance.
Yes.
But let's call it, you said, really no chance? And he said, let's call it maybe under 1%.
Yeah, because the medical, never certainty, so there's some a reluctant 1%.
So, then I was really angry with God. Because I couldn't, the loving Father, I just couldn't understand why He didn't want to give me a baby. So I hardened my heart. I still went through the whole, because there was no chance of not going to church, not going to cell, whatever. But I stopped talking to God, and because I was really angry with Him. And it became such a yearning, it was like months pass, and if you see a baby in a pram, it's like your heart just wants to leap out of and I became quite miserable. And I remember I was at my doctor one time, and then she said to me, when I explained what I'm experiencing, what's going on at work, I want to throw people out the windows, and then she said to me, I think you're depressed. So she actually prescribed medication, which I ended up not at the time taking, but also referred me to a psychologist, which I went to a few times, you also went with. But one day, it was over a weekend, I don't know where Helmut was, I was just sitting on my bed again in our flat. And I just had that, it was just the Father again, and I just had that experience with God where I just cried, and I said, listen, and I repented of, walking away, and I had that experience again of Him coming and putting His arms around me, and from there, my mental health got much better. And towards the end of that year, I remember it was November. A lot of the students had left, so we were having church for some reason in the sports center there at Stellenbosch. And Pastor William Karizan still preached that evening. He also prayed a lot for us, for laid hands on me and so. And I can't remember what even he was preaching about, but it was blessed. And then afterwards we were worshiping, and I remember in the worship just saying to God, wow, you are so wonderful. If I never have a child, it's okay. I will be okay because of you. And I really felt that, absolute peace that if it never happens. And that same evening, now everybody's sort of now petering out, this girl came to me that I didn't know well. We were acquaintances. She said, can I pray for you? Like God laid it on her heart, and she started praying for me. Lots of nice affirming. She prophesied over me. I can't remember anything, but it was very nice. I just remember the very last sentence that she said, oh, and God says you will be a mother. It's like, and it was just, oh, wow. God was so faithful. And then, and from there on, I was really, I remember we went on holiday, went to the family December, and I just said, God says I'm going to be a mother. Whether it's, because then the Ghana dads, they said we can explore the options or whatever. So I said, I don't know what options we're going to experience, but I know I'm going to be a mother. And that January, we found out I was pregnant with Ben. And then, is there still time? Can I just, okay.
Yes, please, it's wonderful.
So this was a miracle, obviously of miracles. It was like, wow, and now the doctor still, every time I went, she said, wow, it's such a miracle. And then I breastfed Ben, up until he started walking, which I always said when he can walk, then he's too big to be breastfed. So when he was 13 months, I stopped breastfeeding. And in that same month, it was October, I went to the doctor for just the yearly, checking the plumbing and everything. And then she said to me, do you want another child? I was like, yeah. And she was like, listen, your numbers are very bad. So don't leave it too long, start now planning. And she wanted to prescribe a medication for me. Can't remember, that makes you, more eggs or whatever. And I still asked her,
Up the chart.
So all the medical students giggling at us
Yeah.
now.
and I said, but, if you take those pills, won't you get like twins and triplets? And the exact words were still, but julle is so onvrugbaar. You guys are so infertile. You won't have twins, even if you take the pills. So, but in the end I said, okay, listen, God just did his thing the first time, so let's do this. If Ben turns 2 and nothing's happened, because now he's 13 months, then we can discuss again the options. And I think basically when I went home the first time, Helmut looked at me again, we conceived the twins with no pills or nothing. So by the time Ben turned 2, the twins were already a month old because they came at 36 weeks. So God just, and then we obviously decided, okay, not to believe the doctors. We are, in fact, not infertile. So we are taking precautions. Because we got more than we can handle. We have enough.
3 is enough.
Our cup runneth over.
That is amazing. It's very precious. This week I went to go visit a mommy with 2 twins. That's why I thought, or twins, and it's amazing, but it's a handful. That's very inspiring. And I want to say many of you here are either young married or still students. But when that day comes, ladies, and you have to trust for baby. This church has so many testimonies of God's faithfulness and so many young Samuels that we are raising in our midst because of God saying, when God says you will be a mother, you will be a mother. So hang on to these stories for that day. So crises, what are highlights that you look back at, Helmut, in your life?
Sure. It's I thought about that question. It's probably one of the most difficult ones because there are so many highlights for me, and that's why we're trying to touch on some of those. So the time when the guy prayed for me and I could see that didn't have to use the glasses anymore. Times when there was times in high school that was tough for me, and times where I prayed for specific things to happen, or God to move teachers, whatever, and God did that. Those stand out for me. Meeting a wife, there's no time to go into this, but I think both of us got a good stories around before we met and how we met, and that God is faithful to bring us together and get us over the line. We needed a little bit of help to get
He needed some help. He'd never had a girlfriend before. I had to tell him he must ask me out now. You must invite me to coffee. I'm doing all the work.
Yeah, definitely. That is true. That is true. But before that, I just didn't feel like I could. Even with all those good things happening at a personal level, I didn't feel good enough to be loved by somebody else. So even though the house was good and all those things, and I think that sort of, if you look at life, the devil really throws everything he can against you to hurt you and to destroy you and to destroy your destiny. And even though I grew up in a very safe environment at home and at church, school wasn't so safe. School was not great. There was a lot of abuse at school. And I was a small guy. I'm taller now. I weighed 57 kgs in a trick, so you can imagine how much I weighed in grade 8. I was really small. So it was easy. Bullying was easy. It wasn't a difficult thing for anybody. And I remember they didn't fight me too hard because I fought back. But it's never nice to fight for survival in that sort of scenario. So there's a lot of hurt that came from that as well. And God healed me from that as well. And to a point where I could say that I can be loved. And that was all happening before I met, because then nothing would have happened. I wouldn't have had the guts to ask her out. I still remember the one time I walked to your house. And I asked her out for a move.
No, listen, we were together in Cell, okay? So it was a holiday because it was the very first local government elections. Was it 96?
Yeah, probably.
And so it was not going to be a public holiday. So we were in Cell chatting, and I mentioned to somebody that I'm going to go watch this movie tomorrow, Cry the Beloved Country. And he wasn't, he was a cell leader of a bunch. That was not training for raining. We were like 5, 6 women that he had to, I think there was one guy, Claudia, but he didn't last long. Because like we, the girls, we were like every week, one of us would crack up in hysterics and cry, and he would just make the tea and pass the tissue. So he was really trained well there. So the next day, in the morning, somebody knocks on the door. It's like, here's Helmuth. It's like, huh? Hello? I said, no, I'm here for the movie. I'm coming with you. It's like, okay. So we'd walked all the way down from up there, Tasselweg down. We lived just across from Bloemhof School. So we went to watch the movie together. But then, that was 96, 7. So we watched a lot of movies together. We were good friends, nothing more. In fact, when that thing hit, that, wat is weerligstraal? That lightning hit, and I realized, oh wow, you know, it makes my knees weak. It was quite a crisis for me, actually, because he'd been a friend, non-threatening, we were good friends, and then it was like, all of a sudden, now, ex-pap verlief, and now he's, you know, it was difficult, because I'd always said, my sister and me both, we're never getting married, we never, you know what, it's not, and obviously, God getting saved and, you know, coming into God's plan, but anyway, we survived that. And here we sit today.
That's wonderful. I think that to start off in a beautiful friendship based on wiping away each other's or your tears, Estelle, is a wonderful way to start. Helmut, as we close, what's God talking to you and your family about at the moment?
So there's obviously quite a few things, but I think the 2 things that sort of stand out for me is just in prayer. So if you look at our country, sometimes it gets a little bit overwhelming. So God has really challenged me to continue to pray, even though I don't see anything, to still pray and to hold it up, to hold the nation up, our city up. There's a few instances in my life that I also saw that happening, so God has reminded me about that. So during high school, there wasn't a lot of other salvations. I was very, in a sense, lonely in school. I had lots of friends outside of school, but school itself was a bit lonely. And I prayed a lot. But when I left school, there was a major revival, and like we have a lot of friends or people that we know that even joined Shofar afterwards that got saved as part of that salvation. So I've seen that happening. So God's continuing reminding me of those things, but I didn't see the fruits immediately, but afterwards there were fruits. So, you know, and I think it's also, as you grow older in life, you realize that you can't do everything, and that there's seasons. Your life is going to end at one day. You're not going to live forever here on this earth. And trying to, you know, be obedient to what God is asking us to do, because whatever, you know, the legacy we leave is not just our children, a lot of it is our prayer. The prayers that we pray, the prayers that Jesus prayed is still being answered. So, you know, that's something that really encourages me to keep on praying that God loves this nation, and, you know, asking for God's grace over, not just for our financial woes, but really more from a spiritual side, you know, for salvations, for revival in our country. And then the other thing, for a more personal note, is just to wait on God, and just to be in His presence. So it's been really, you know, working from home has not been a pleasure, to be frank. It's been really tough, long hours all the time. There's lots of pressure, and so the last few months, God's really challenging me just to wait on Him, just to continually wait on Him and to find my strength in Him, and not do so much. So I've been trying to do less, in a sense, or worry less about all the, you know, sometimes, you know, the things that consume you, to really leave it up to God and just wait on Him. So that's something. Yeah, there's quite a few scriptures in Psalm 27, Psalm 37, Isaiah 40, you know, talking about waiting on the Lord and renewing your strength. But for me, it's a little bit more than that. It's around just being in the space of being with God, in the presence of God, and not trying to perform, not trying to think what is the next thing, just trying to really enjoy God's presence and worship Him, and be, you know, start from that place of being a worshiper. So that's really, from a personal note, that's sort of something that I've been praying through and practicing, trying.
Wow. If I remember correctly, 1986, you gave your life to the Lord, and holding your salvation so dearly. But to hear from what you say, God's saying to you now is His presence. And being young, we often think it's the great moves of God that we'll be part of, or preaching, or these acts. And you can sit here with tears in your eyes and tell me intimacy with God. My prayers matter more than anything, that quiet space with God, that God has burdened your heart for our country. And I've heard that in so many people in our church community's heart, that I wonder how we are filling those basins of prayer before the throne of God. Helmuth and Estelle, thank you so much for sharing your story. We trust that you'll stay here and minister with us as we go into worship. For those streaming in, thank you so much for spending the evening with us. We trust you have a good evening further. For those of you here still, I'm going to hand over to Philip and Susal in a moment for worship. But as you worship, the theme for me that stands out is the goodness of God leading us to His throne, to our knees every time. And Estelle explained it so beautifully with that hand gesture that I can so relate with, is the journey felt when we started. Some of you might start tonight. It feels as if you're going to do this solid, straight up to the top, and it's just going to be this high hill moment, this mountaintop lifestyle that you're going to live with the Lord. And the road with the Lord is actually one that looks a lot like that, because there's so much in us that needs refining. There's so much in us that needs to discover different facets of God. So as you're worshiping and you bring those places in your heart to God, whether you're in a low point or a high point, if you need ministry in an area, if something that this couple said that have been so faithful and who can sit here and say, above all else, to be in God's presence is something, come forward tonight and ask them, please pray with me for this and this. And let's trust that there's a God encounter here tonight and not just a listening to people's story. And enjoy the time of worship. And really this morning when we were worshiping, I just thought of that scripture in Isaiah of God's train moving through the room. And let's seek to worship God because He is worthy. Thank you, Phil.